I thought I'd just start with a little bit about who I am, what I do. Thanks, Jeff, for the intro. So born and bred on a sheep and beef farm in the Waikato. And actually just in your talk there, Murph, I started sort of having a recollection of, as a kid, I think Dad or his father maybe must have introduced something that was, and you'll probably know this, that ate the seeds of nodding thistles. So I remember as a kid getting taken out into a paddock where I had to go to a nodding thistle, pull out the seed, or pull out where the seed was, and to our excitement, you'd find probably a weevil, I think.
Yeah, weevils,
Yeah, and then you'd pull out where the seeds would have been dispersed by the wind, but there were no seeds. So it's quite an interesting memory that's popped up that's really relative to what we're talking about here. So a couple of pictures up here. Hopefully none of those pictures will be as scary as the pictures that Murph's shown you, and particularly not down the bottom there is my daughter. She is, I was just telling Jeff before, is a budding ecologist or keen ecologist in her final year at school. And so she is my favourite staff member that I've got just at the moment. But key for me, I've been sort of a banker or involved in agriculture or rural my whole life. Started doing more around the sustainability and environmental stuff, and then started enjoying that more than my actual banking job. So then moved to Balance, where I ran the farm sustainability team, and have just, as Jeff said, just launched my own business called EnviroConsult. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is helping farmers and growers, and that's been through my banking days with their financial decisions and all that sort of stuff, but now certainly in this environmental and sustainability piece. Just because I or you are really interested in this doesn't mean you'll find me chained to a tree in a park or gluing my hand to the road. I'm passionate about it because of what it does on farms, and also what it does for biodiversity, whether that be the feathered variety or some of the things that I've learnt about with Murph today. Just the bottom there, a lot of what I do is work with plans. So I can help draw up a plan, or I can project manage a plan that you've got done for a specific purpose. That's what I'm working on at the moment over in the Bay of Plenty, which has got a planting plan for various reasons, and we'll talk about some of those reasons shortly. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Gina. So I just thought I've talked about what I can discuss, what my expertise is. I'm not an ecologist. I'm not a scientist. I don't even know what some of the words that Murph said were just earlier. So I'll focus on the stuff that I know. There's lots of other experts and highly intelligent people that will talk to you today and will wander around for the afternoon. So make sure you use those resources. One of the key things that I'm going to end up with here is talking about dollars and cents. I'm an ex-banker, obviously, so I'm going to love that. But there's a huge amount to consider before we get to that. And the variables and the choices that you make on your projects, really, really critical to where this lands. The other thing I'll say is, when I've just said I'm just going to give you some answers, I'm not going to be able to give you all of the answers because of the variables that you can control and what you can't. I think what's going to be really interesting post this is when we hear from Mike and Olivia, because they've got real examples of what they've tried to do, maybe what ended up happening, and then how they've got back on track or changed what they're aiming at. So the very first thing for me, and this is the bit that's linked back to the question I think that came to Murph, is making sure you start at the very, very start. And so that seems like a pretty obvious thing. And apologies here, it's sort of a little bit Simon Sinek around the why thing, but it's really, really important to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if you start there, then that is going to be the leading path that you can follow through all the other pieces that I'm going to talk through. Some of those things, and again related to Murph, is that biological control piece. Maybe it's just your conscience. Maybe it's that sort of social good around the environment. A lot of what we're seeing and a lot of the conversations that I'm having the far one there is talking about, consumer led. So what are the expectations of our consumers or of your final product? There's a little bit there too about what are the expectations of, maybe you're a family-owned enterprise, maybe you've got investors. So what are the expectations of them in this space, and how are you going to meet those needs or satisfy that? I've got local government there, important for a couple of reasons, and I won't go into this in a massive amount of detail, but most of you know there's freshwater farm plans through the Essential Freshwater Package. That's in a bit of limbo at the moment, although still kind of legally obliged if you're a grower that's over 5 hectares, but maybe that's your purpose. Couple of jobs I'm doing at the moment have consent conditions around this sort of stuff. So yes, we can grant a consent for you to take water from here. One of the conditions is some planting or some weed pest eradication or something. And so it's just ensuring really clearly what it is that you're aiming at. So start there, and then really stick tightly to it and don't lose focus of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Alongside that, and not to confuse it, is just make sure that you're really aware of what other benefits there could be that pop up for you. And I've got a couple here, and I won't steal, I don't think, too much of Mike's thunder, but there's a lot of benefits that link into family or staff. So don't underestimate what those are, and you'll get some more flavour for some of those a bit later on. I've got ETS and non-ETS there. Again, this is one to get some really good advice from an expert on. But a job I'm doing at the moment wants me to ensure that the species that I'm planting have the ability to meet what the ETS needs it to meet in case they want to do that in the future. So it's about making sure that right at the start, then that might not be the sole purpose, but as an added benefit, they want us to make sure that we're covering off that piece should it pop up. Manuka's another big one, often with larger plantings, where there's a lot of manuka involved. Honey and bees are an opportunity. I've got a bee there as a pollinator. I was just talking to Jeff about this. As I was doing a bit of research, I actually found I think it's a paper or a trial or some study work that ALT had done around finding pollinators that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So you sort of think, in this kiwi fruit work I'm doing, bees is their main pollinator. In actual fact, there are a huge, and Murph will be nodding in a minute, I'm sure there are a huge amount of pollinators outside of bees. And so that's going to be a potential, either it's a key thing for what you're aiming at in your why, or it might be an added benefit that you can consider and ensure that your planting plan or your project meets to take full advantage of. I've got non-ETS there. There's lots of businesses that will be able to measure carbon or carbon sequestration from your plantings. And whilst that may not fit perfectly into the ETS and you may not want it to, but actually there is a calculation there so that you know what carbon you're taking out. So again, may not be the key thing that you're aiming at, but actually just make sure that you're aware of all the other things, and then if you want to potentially pick up something else, make sure that your project or your plan encompasses that. Okay, so I think there's going to be a lot of P's in here, and I'll sort of slowly work my way through them. Lots of questions, or lots of opportunity for questions at the end or across the day. But it's got to start with a plan, and I think the key thing with a plan is to make sure you plan early. Coming back to the dollars and cents thing, and I suppose with anything, the better you plan and the more lead-in time you give yourself is directly related to, one, the success of your project, and two, that cost piece. If the planting season's coming up, right now, so most species need to be planted in the winter. If you haven't got your plan underway now and well underway, then actually I would suggest that you're a year out. And a year seems like a long time, but actually it's well worth it in terms of getting a successful project underway, because you've pretty much left it too late. The other thing here is, and Murph put this pretty well, start with a corner. So you'll have a farm or an orchard or whatever it is, and there's probably heaps of opportunities for native plantings, but actually just start with a corner and make it manageable. And that way too, you can sort of find your feet. You'll make some mistakes, you'll get some stuff wrong, but on a smaller scale, it's a good place to start, learn from, and then roll through. A lot of the projects I do are multi-stage, multi-year anyway, and that is from a availability of labour and particularly a cost perspective too. It's not cheap to do this stuff, so actually multi-year sort of means that you can stretch that out, and you learn a lot along the way as well. So really critical piece and most important is to get your plan right, and that's when are you going to do it, who you're going to use, how you're going to do it, what species, all those sorts of things come into your plan. When I've worked all the way through this, I'm going to share a sheet that sort of says that has some costings on it, and obviously you can do. There's lots of different types of plan, and I'll share with you kind of what that looks like from a cost perspective as well. Okay, so next P is preparation. So you've got your plan, you know who's doing it, you've got your planters all organised, you've got everything organised. The really critical bit here is how you prepare. So preparing your site is really important. And look, it's not lost on me here that you're all growers, right? So you're good at growing stuff. So you know that site preparation and preparation for your crops is really important. I suppose the thing that's going to challenge you here, and it might not at the start, but it will somewhere along the way, is that this is not your core job. I mean, I'm really passionate about this. This is all I do. But actually, you're going to grow some vegetables, you're going to grow a crop or something, and that's going to be your core role and your core focus. So at some stage, you're going to get busy, and that's the risk through this process, is that you take your eye off that, and quite rightly, you've got something else to deal with on farm, and that's when the risks sort of start rearing their head here. So again, good plan and working really well through this process that I'm going to talk to is really critical. So preparation, there's going to be some pest weeds that you need to start getting rid of, and then you're going to have to prepare the site for planting. And again, I'll on the next slide, I'll go through kind of the scale of sort of costs that can be involved in the preparation piece. I didn't know the little book existed actually until someone just held it up then, so I quickly grabbed it and had a look. That is actually a really good book. There's lots of species and varieties in there. I'm not, as I said, I'm not an ecologist, but actually getting this part right is really important. It's going to be, you should have covered it off in your plan anyway, so you kind of know what those are. This is really hard to source, and I had a bit of a look at the project that Olivia had run. COVID didn't help, obviously, for you, but actually finding some of the plants is really quite difficult. Depending again on what species, there's sort of that piece around coloniser species, which are those kind of manuka, carnuka, karamu, flaxes, cabbage trees, those sort of things that are coloniser species are pretty easy to find, they're pretty cheap. But once you start getting into some of your coprosmas or your specialty ground covers, which are covered in the book as well, they're not so readily grown and they are harder to source. So once again, making sure that you're getting in early and well planned is really critical to be able to have a successful and a cost-effective project. Go wholesale wherever you can too. Generally speaking, you're going to be in larger volumes, so make sure that you really look hard for that wholesaler end of the market rather than that kind of retailer, because that's going to cost you a whole lot more. You're going to have to work on an average too, and I think Mike's going to talk to this too, what he's learnt, but there'll be an averaging obviously of your bulk and then your and then the type of plant you get. One of the things that will be in your plan, and Merv talked about this, is the good bugs and bad bugs piece. In some of the varieties, you've got an absolute no-no around providing an awesome habitat for the things that you don't want. I suppose one of the things to remember here too, though, is that some of those pest weeds that you're eradicating, if I think of gorse, if I think of blackberry, woolly nightshade, they are an awesome habitat for some of the bugs that you don't want as well. So that's something to consider, making sure you get that right, but then also really critical, obviously, around the plant species. Another one, the pre-plant piece. So this is making sure that you're executing the plan that you've got. So getting the timings piece, getting the site preparation right, ensuring that you've got the plants in the right place at the right time for the right people. The right people are there. It rolls pretty closely into the planting piece, and I'll be interested in Mike's thoughts here. It sounds pretty easy to plant something, but actually again, that pre-plant and that planting piece is highly critical to the success of the project. I've seen projects where 50% death rate has occurred in plants because some of these pieces, but really critical bit is the pre-plant and the actual planting itself. Again, once start getting losses like that, that cost effectiveness of the project starts severely blowing out. What else have I got here? I wasn't sure if I was going to say this, but I will, is that, and this is sort of the blokes in the room, block your ears, but females are far better at this. They tend to care more, be gentle. I don't know what it is. Blokes are pretty good at the preparation stuff, getting there, knocking over weeds, but actually if you can find, maybe it's one of your staff that loves this sort of stuff, you'll find that females seem to just manage this planting process a whole lot better. Notwithstanding, obviously, I'm a bloke and there's a whole lot of blokes in here, but it's just something that I have found of interest. The last bit is the post-plant, and this bit here is the really critical bit, because there's a whole lot involved in this, and the easy bit here is to go, it's done. So now I can get back to my day job, or I can focus on the next thing, or I can start my planning for next year. If you let this piece go, this will damage the project the most. It can mean the highest amount of losses. It can mean the most cost when it comes to getting back on track. More is better, and again, you as growers, you're really good at this, right? Monitoring is critical. So just like you get out and monitor your crop for whatever it is, diseases or bugs or whatever it is that you're monitoring them for, make sure you have that same focus for your natives. Really easy to get out of control, lose it, and then more cost comes with having to infill plant or follow up. I've just done a really good example for the Bay of Plenty Regional Council where there's some funding for a project. They've got the initial planting, and then they've got 2 releases over 2 years. So that's a good example of making sure that there is, and that's funded. So makes it a whole lot easier, but having really good, clear plan around this post-plant piece is important. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have to do a massive amount every time, but actually when you do need to, that's going to be really critical. One of the jobs I'm just doing at the moment, a whole lot of seasonal workers working through kiwi fruit picking. At about October, I think it's the first week of October, the owner of those orchards had said to me, hey, I've got a whole lot of staff floating around in between jobs for a handful of days, maybe a week. So possibly you're going to have that opportunity as well. I'm going to use those people to get in and do some post-planting maintenance. So not going to cost the owner anything other than the wages that they've got anyway. So just making sure you're utilising every opportunity that you have on farm to keep that cost piece down. All of this comes back to choices, and sorry, this is a really busy slide, but in short, the choices that you make around these pieces that I've talked about will lead directly to impacting another choice or your costs. So people on the screen won't be able to, oh, maybe I've got a pointer actually. I'm too scared to push that in case I turn it off. The cheapest end, so maybe I should say the most cost-effective end on a per plant range, so I've got per plant along the bottom, is doing it all yourself. And that's all well and good, but it kind of links back to that, maybe starting in the corner on a small bit. Maybe you're going to use some more specialists, maybe you're going to do things slightly different, maybe it'll end up being more costly, so up to the $6 to $8 per plant, maybe more, maybe 10, but actually you're going to have the opportunity to get some experts in, and you're going to learn and understand that process a whole lot better. As I say, the further back to the left-hand side you come, the cheaper it is. I think you can probably find, if you find a good wholesaler, you might be able to find plants at $2.50. I'll be interested to see what Mike says, maybe $3 for some of those coloniser species. Maybe they might be a bit more, 6, 7, 8 per plant only for some of those more specific species. But making sure that you do that work and making sure that you've got a plant that's going to do the job that you want it to, so well-grown, disease-free. Make sure that the plant you're buying is either eco-sourced, so that means sort of sourced locally from species that are growing well in the climate and in the environment and the area that you are going to plant them in. The best seeds I ever get are from the farm that I'm then planting plants into in subsequent years. I think I'm going all right for time. Just working my way through this piece. So the plan piece, again, it's linked quite directly to the purpose. So you may need an ecologist. If you've got something to satisfy for a council, say, you might need an ecologist to have done that plan. In terms of your site preparation, again, kind of if you're going to do it yourself and you're going to do spray only on your weed pests, then you'll be able to do that yourself up to the end, the swinging further up the end to using some of the woolen matting, which I think we're going to see a bit of this afternoon. In theory, that the choices bit that I talked about, in theory, that matting should mean that you've got less post-planting maintenance, because obviously that's going to suppress weeds for a longer period of time. However, things can happen. I see Olivia smiling. I'll leave that surprise to you. But we work in an environment where we don't know, and it's pretty cold today. It's pretty hot a week ago. More prevalent heavy rainfall. So all of those things are obviously going to affect your project negatively or positively. But again, that key piece is that continuing to monitor. Planting, I've talked about species and sourcing, age, size, wholesale, retail. All of that is obviously going to affect your price point. Same with planting, and again, same. I've covered off that post-planting maintenance. I've got there a range as low as, probably what I didn't mention in the plants thing is, of course, you can grow them yourself. That opens then a whole can of worms. Again, you're good at growing stuff, but I'd urge, it takes attention and constant attention to grow good native plants, and so absolutely that's an opportunity, and then you'll start getting your per plant range on the lower side of $3 if you do grow them yourself and then do all that maintenance and work yourselves. But you can sort of move through the range. It's not an exact science, up to $10 or $12 per plant, depending on that species and that site preparation, ongoing maintenance. So that's the cost piece. What I said at the start is that I certainly don't have all the answers in this piece. It's going to come back to that the why are you doing this project and what are you doing it for around some of these benefits. Clearly you're going to have some that are that you can see in dollars and cents, and others are those non-monetary ones. I think again Michael talked to some of those in his experiences too, but it comes back to that social license. It comes back to having family and staff, or it comes back to the fact that maybe, and I think Olivia might be able to talk to this in some of their findings, maybe Mike as well, but maybe instead of having to spray 3 times, you only need to spray twice or once. So then that's a much easier way for you to go, well, that would have cost me this much. But actually it's hard around, it'll be specific to each property and each site, each crop probably as well. It'll be different between growers and then regions and seasons. And so this is the bit where I think there's more research that needs to be done and will be done. But you can nail down the dollars and cents on some of those things if they are specific, like as I say, using less sprays. Okay, so some take-home messages from me before we open up to some questions is get some help. And again, you can start small in the corner, get some help for that. Maybe that's going to be the most expensive little part of your project on your farm, but at least you're going to learn a lot and you're going to understand the ins and outs of your plan and working your way through it. Clearly understand what it is you're trying to achieve and make sure that remains really nice and central. I've written planning 3 times so that hopefully you'll notice it. And then I've written early in capitals because that's important as well, as I talked about. The good preparation piece and then executing it well. You've got a plan, make sure you do a good job of it. I've written maintenance 3 times and 1 in capitals as well, so you notice that. I think getting the planning piece and getting the maintenance piece are the absolute keys. If you miss that maintenance piece, it becomes very, very, very expensive, and even might get back to the point of actually now you're going to miss what you're trying to achieve because you haven't nailed that piece right. And maybe this comes back to this last bit: refine and improve. Do that little bit in the corner, and then, as I say, your next bit you might do slightly differently. Some of it yourself, all of it yourself, whatever it is. But there's certainly an element of the ability to be able to learn and improve and do things better. In your, I don't know, there's different sized businesses here, I'm sure, but in your staff somewhere, you'll have someone who's really passionate about this. Contrary to my point earlier, it doesn't have to be a female. But if, you give someone some responsibility that loves this stuff, and half your battle's won. That you're going to find them annoying. They're going to come to you and go, "Hey, we need to get out there and we need to do some maintenance. We need to, we need to release some trees." As long as you listen to them, that if you've got someone who owns this project on farm for you, more than half your battle is won, and you're a long way to having a successful project and executing a plan well. I think that is everything from me, so I don't know if there's any questions from the floor or online, Jeff. But I'm obviously walking around with the others for the rest of the day as well, so if you've got any questions that either pop into your head or you don't want to ask now, just tap me on the shoulder. I think I've got this sort of picture in my head, and whether it's a partial farm or an orchard or a cropping farm, I've sort of got this picture in my head of a mosaic of a farm. So there'll be places that you need to put, or you should put, natives. There's probably some places for exotic. So it's about making sure that the right tree is in the right place for the right reasons. And so I'm not against pine tree plantings if it's the right thing for steeper land or erosion prone land. Maybe there's some poplar opportunities. So I think it's all about having the right tree or whatever species it is, in the right place for the right reasons, comes back to that plan. So what's your plan for your property, and then making sure that you put the right species in the right place for the right reasons. What will happen is that you will have some challenges. So your perfectly laid plan, as with most plans I've found, don't work exactly as you think it was going to anyway. So seeing and hearing some stories of things that didn't go right is actually pretty good.